Russian attack on the cities of Ukraine continues as the war enters day 44. After the Bucha massacre, Ukrainian President Zelensky has now said that the situation in the town of Bordyanka near Kyiv is significantly more dreadful than in nearby Bucha. Meanwhile, other cities have been crippled by relentless attacks by Russia. Bucha has seen massive destruction and devastation. The streets of the city are filled with burnt tanks and vehicles. Residential buildings in the area have been burnt to ashes. The port city of Mariupol is in ruins. Burnt buildings, charred vehicles. The city has seen several injuries. The scenes are of locals rescuing civilians who have been grievously injured in attacks.
The work to clear the rubble in Borodyanka has begun. It's significantly more dreadful there. Even more victims from the Russian occupiers. And what will happen when the world learns the whole truth about what the Russian military did in Mariupol? There, on almost every street, is what the world saw in Bucha and other towns in the Kyiv region after the withdrawal of Russian troops. The same cruelty, the same terrible crimes.
Now
this is a team that is on standby. It's slowly going forward, inching forward, trying to look for survivors in this rubble. This building, according to information given by people here, was destroyed in an airstrike and emergency workers could not get here in time. But some locals say there could be survivors here, and that is why the focus is on this building, one of the many that have been targeted here in Berdyansk. So healthcare workers and emergency workers are all here standing by amidst locals saying that they've heard voices coming from inside this rubble, and that is why their effort is to try and get into this area. What they're also doing here is trying to put oxygen through a pipe and trying to send food down, because if people had gone down and found a cavity to survive, in case voices are still being heard in the rubble, they're hoping against hope that there would be survivors inside and perhaps in a bunker or a basement. So food packets are here, water is here, doctors are on standby, all in an effort to find survivors amidst this wrecked building destroyed in an airstrike, another building destroyed in a missile strike here in Berdyansk, Ukraine. It's only now that healthcare workers and emergency services have been able to reach here, and they still say it's a race against time to save lives. With cameraman Lalit Mohan Joshi in Berdyansk, Ukraine, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
Rajesh Pawar is now joining me live from Kyiv in Ukraine. Rajesh, what is the situation on the ground as we speak today on day 44, especially because we've been reporting that Russia seems to have retreated from the outskirts of the capital, but it is now concentrating and intensifying its attack on the eastern part of Ukraine, on the southern part of Ukraine?
Look, the capital city has been quiet for now almost a week. There have been no attacks, no raids, no military actions in or around Kyiv now for more than a week. Things are quite calm here. Life is coming back to normal. People who had left the city, lots of them have come back and more people are coming in. The shops are opening up, not all of them, but a lot of them now. Supermarkets are full of supplies now. So things are getting back to normal. Public transport has started functioning in Kyiv. Right now I'm in a taxi in Kyiv going to Gaztomel airport. So things here are getting back to normal. But as you said, rightly said, the things in the east and south are still intensifying. There's a lot of fighting going on in Donbass, in Lugansk and Donetsk province. Also in the south, there have been bombardment on many locations in Odessa. So south and east is witnessing intense fighting right now between the two forces, the Russians and the Ukrainians. However, things around the city of Kyiv and Chernihiv remains more or less normal, and there has been no military activity in this area. Over to you.
Rajesh, what can you tell us about the Russian strategy right now in what seems to be stage 2 or phase 2 of this invasion? Because there was some sort of a lull for a bit of a period in between, and now they seems to have regrouped, re-armored themselves and have gone back to the Donbass region, which they want to claim. So they are, of course, intensifying the attack, but there has been some amount of rethinking, given some sort of a miscalculation that happened in the early stages of this invasion.
Look, there are two different kind of things happening. One, the statements coming from Kremlin, and there was a statement yesterday that they might finish off their operations pretty soon, and all the military activities or the invasion of Russian forces in Ukraine will come to an end. But on the other side, what Ukrainian intelligence is saying, that the Russian forces which left north of Ukraine and around the area around Kyiv went through Belarus to the east of Ukraine, and they are planning a major offensive in the eastern southern parts of Ukraine in the coming days. So these two contradictory versions coming from opposing sides, from Ukrainians and the Russians. But what looks possible is that till the time Russia does not take control of 100% of Donbass, that's Lugansk and Donetsk province, their military operations will continue.
All right, Rajesh, thank you so much for bringing us all of those details from on ground. So he, of course, Rajesh, saying that the concentration now is on the eastern and the southern part, especially the Donbass region, which Russia is concentrating all of its efforts on at the moment. The war in Ukraine is about to be a month and a half old. Russian President Vladimir Putin launched his offensive against Ukraine on the 24th of February with a clear intention of a swift victory. A month later, it seems a distant dream. Zealous Ukraine has forced him to change his strategy in the past 43 days.
On 24th March, a month into the war, Ukraine's navy sank the Russian ship Orks in the Sea of Azov. The attack destroyed a ship laden with supplies. It also drove other Russian ships back into the sea and damaged Berdyansk port. It was a crucial blow to Putin's military plans.
The fact that the war has been going on as long as it has, without it being a decisive victory yet for Russia, gives hope to Ukraine. I think in some respects this action will backfire on Putin, because Ukraine might even be closer to the West, which is exactly his opposite outcome that he desired.
Putin's special operation in Ukraine was supposed to end in a swift victory. It was never supposed to cross 30 days. But what he didn't take into account was the zeal of Ukrainians to fight for their country.
I've taken the decision to conduct a special military operation. Its purpose is to protect people who have been subject to abuse and genocide by the Kyiv regime for 8 years. And to do this, we will strive to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine.
Things surely did not go as Putin planned. Russia launched its attack from two sides on 24th February. While one part of its troops moved in from Belarus and attacked Ukraine from north, another approached from the eastern flank along the Donbass separatists. After standing outside Kyiv for days, the Russian military announced a strategic change in plans. This was exactly 5 days after Ukraine's marine attack on the Sea of Azov.
Some of the operations we see are borderline amateurish. They are very quick to fail. They are very prone to ambushes from Ukrainian forces. So overall, they might have tried to chew a bit more than they can bite, or the other way around, in biting into Ukrainian territory, which calls for a reassessment now. The problem is that the Kremlin needs to turn this operation into a form of victory, whatever the cost. There will be a necessary face-saving for Putin himself, because he just can't back down, right, and declare that the operation is off.
The decision taken at Istanbul hit road bumps soon after the Russian and Ukrainian sides left Turkey. After first 30 days, Russia started to retreat from the north and concentrate on the south and east.
It looked as if the Russians have been beaten, clearly, in Kiev. They've given up on trying to take Kiev for the time being. We thought they probably tried to give up on taking Odessa, because they're not making much progress. They're even further away from Mykolaiv than they were last week. So they're being pushed away from Odessa, not towards it. However, if they're going to reorganize and try to move into the southeast of the country, in the Donbass region, and then push this land bridge all the way across the southern coast of Ukraine, all the way through Crimea to Odessa, then maybe that will become part of their strategic requirement again, and we might see a renewed attempt to take Odessa. But I have to say, they're still quite a long way from doing that, and I think that the Russians will find that they've got a pretty tough fight in the Donbass, because they'll be up against the best of the Ukrainian forces, who are all concentrated, and as they have been for the last 8 years, in that southeastern part of the country.
But the retreat came at a cost. Bodies littered all over Bucha, the most horrific episode of the war. Ukraine claimed it was a war crime. The world joined in. Russia denied a hand in the killings, saying its troops had left Bucha days before the bodies were found. But the world backed Ukraine. More sanctions were imposed on Russia by the US, UK and others, and more arms were pledged to it. An even more isolated Putin is now fully focused on Ukraine's east and south, hoping somehow to salvage his pride. Bureau Report, India Today.
Ukraine is bracing for Russia's fiercest war push as the war enters its 44th day. Moscow has moved all its personnel and war machines towards the east. Kyiv is expecting a bigger, deadlier and more brutal war in the eastern region. Kharkiv, Mariupol, Luhansk and Donetsk are Putin's prime targets.
It is the next stage of Russian offensive, and it promises to be deadlier, bloodier and more brutal. Weeks into a punishing push into Ukraine amid fierce resistance and reverses in Warzone. Putin's invasion army is now planning a mega change of battle tactics. After halting its offensive in and around Kyiv, Russia is preparing an all-out offensive, targeting Kharkiv, Mariupol, Luhansk and Donetsk. The aim is perhaps to salami slice Ukraine's east and establish a corridor starting from Crimea to all the way to Kharkiv.
With the decision to withdraw forces from western Ukraine, the focus is now on eastern Ukraine. Mariupol almost taken, Volvanaka under Russian control, and this, Donetsk and Luhansk, is the war zone.
So what emerges from the chain strategy is a relentless Russian bombing spree and intensified attacks on Ukraine's southern and eastern parts. Kyiv has told residents of eastern Ukraine regions of Kharkiv, Luhansk and Donetsk to evacuate now or risk death. The governor of Luhansk has warned of a doomsday assault on the city, warning that Russia is building up troops for offensive in a matter of days, revealing that Russian forces are attacking Popasna city with Grad rocket launchers and jets. The massive twist in Russian war game has triggered fears of a prolonged war. NATO chief said there has been no sign that the Russian president has dropped his ambition to control the whole of Ukraine, adding the war could last for many months or even years.
We have seen no indication that President Putin has changed his ambition to control the whole of Ukraine and also to rewrite the international order. So we need to be prepared for a long haul. We need to support Ukraine, sustain our sanctions and strengthen our defenses and our deterrence. Because this can last for a long time and we need to be prepared for that.
Has the Ukraine war entered an even more difficult phase? With Geeta Mohan in Donetsk.
My colleague Akshita Nandagopal shows you the devastation and doom in the 3 worst hit cities of Ukraine in this report.
44 days of the war in Ukraine, and what we want to do now is to show you the kind of devastation that's been reported in many cities of Ukraine, starting with Bucha. We're going to show you an aerial view of what the city looked like before, and what everyone's talking about, those civilian bodies. Remember that this is very close to the Hostomel airport. It's in the suburbs of Kyiv. Now, if you really go into what the layout of Bucha looks like, a bustling city, as you see on your screens, there's so many buildings. Mind you, this is before the war, before all the destruction. This building that you see on your screens here is the St. Andrew's Church. And the reason we're showing this to you is because it's around here that those horrifying mass graves were actually discovered. These pictures are of the graves that we've been showing you and that it's been found by the Ukrainian troops once the Russian troops moved back. Along the trenches of this church, they've dug right through, and there have been bodies that have been pulled out for the last many days. Horrifying scenes that have been witnessed all along the St. Andrew's Church in the heart of Bucha is where these bodies were found, roughly dug out across that area. That's where it was seen. Let's also tell you what the situation is in other parts of Ukraine. We've shown you what Bucha looks like. Hostomel Airport, very close to Bucha, as we showed you. This is a place and an airbase strategically hugely important. It's very close to Kyiv, which is why in the very start of this invasion, in the very start of this war, Russia started targeting this massive airbase. They started bombing it. There were air assaults. And what I also want to highlight here is that you see these hangars in this particular sequencing that we're showing you. It's within this hangar that you had Mriya, which means dream in Ukrainian, the world's largest aircraft stationed here. And what you see right now of this once beautiful, huge airbase and of this beautiful aircraft is nothing but debris. Piles of rubble that's left behind as a result of Russian bombing. Let's tell you now what's happening also in another city, port city of Mariupol, close to the Sea of Azov, as you see here. As we zoom in closer to the city, again, let me highlight this is before the war, so you see how lovely the entire layout of this particular city is. This is in fact the regional drama theatre, the Donetsk Regional Drama Theatre in Mariupol. It's a huge property. You can see around it also there are buildings. And while this massive building stands in this particular aerial footage that we're showing you, let's show you what it looks like now. Horrifying to see the kind of destruction. That entire circle that you see around has been completely ruined. The green is now completely removed. The building, this is what it looks like now because of an airstrike by Russian troops. Ukraine has maintained that this building, this drama theatre, was actually serving as a shelter and was targeted by Russia with a clear aim of ensuring that civilians also are dead. But this particular sequence that we've just shown you here highlights the grim reality of war, what it does to bustling, beautiful cities, to iconic places and architecture in these cities of Ukraine.
A big blow to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The United Nations General Assembly has suspended Russia from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Now, this comes after Kyiv accused Moscow of human rights abuse and war crimes in Bucha. The US-led push garnered 93 votes in favor of suspension, while 24 countries voted no and 58 countries abstained. India is among the 58 abstentions. New Delhi called for peace and continued dialogue. Now, the cry for a united opposition against Russia grows stronger by the day. Isolated by the world, Russians are fighting the demon of Putin's propaganda, and detention threats are on their way. Some left their country as soon as the Ukraine war started, while others continue to protest despite grave risks to their lives and families.
Russian President Vladimir Putin hates people protesting on the streets. The autocrat has used the harshest measures to quell agitations, particularly the ones against his war on Ukraine. Yet the protests have not stopped. They have only increased as more and more horrors are unveiled to the world. Hundreds were detained from across Russia, including the remote Siberia, in the most recent of protests. The protest against Putin's unprovoked attack on Ukraine began 2 days after the invasion. And since then, people have been hitting the streets as the world rushed to isolate Russia. Putin's government has banned the use of the word war, instead calling it special operations. But that did not stop a journalist from storming into a live news broadcast on a Russian TV channel, holding up a poster reading "No War" and "Russians Against War." She was taken into custody and was released after a hefty fine.
I
went to the stationery store, bought markers and made this sign in English for the Western viewers because I wanted to show the whole world that Russians are against the war, and what was written in Russian was intended for Russian viewers so that they would not believe Russian propaganda and would look for other news.
Ovviamente lo spettatore occidentale, perché volevo far vedere.
Miles away from home, Andrei Nokrin sent a clip of Marina's protest to his mother in Moscow.
I've done it to show her the other side opinion and to try to help her to see the other side and to just maybe have her own thoughts on the events that are happening, not just the propaganda she might be getting from the TV.
A day after Russia invaded Ukraine, Olga and Nikolai Kustov packed up and left St. Petersburg. They took their children out of school, bundled their aging cat into a crate and moved to a different country away from Russia.
What happened did not leave us the option to live our previous lives. Even if we stayed in our flat, doing our old jobs with our friends and relatives. The world lived one way before February 24, and now it lives differently.
In an effort to clamp down on protests, Kremlin has blocked social media like Instagram and Facebook.
90% of my orders are on Instagram. I've got only 2 orders from VKontakte. It's useless.
Russian President Vladimir Putin knows that discontent is growing as sanctions are beginning to pinch ordinary people. So he's countering it by trying to spark nationalist feelings in the country. And his first target is the youth of Russia. Bureau Report, India Today.